This podcast provides information to help esports professionals identify and approach legal problems. This podcast is intended for informational purposes only. Legal information is not the same as legal advice, which is an application of law to a party's specific set of circumstances.
You should not and are not authorized to use this podcast as a source of legal advice, and the information in this podcast does not create an attorney-client relationship between the Law of Esports podcast, any of the lawyers or affiliates of the podcast, and any consumer of this podcast.
Welcome to the Law of Esports podcast, the number one podcast to discuss legal issues in the world of esports. My name is Jake Hicks. I'm an attorney that represents teams, leagues, and organizations.
And I am Nefi Lopez, and I'm an attorney that represents players, streamers, and personalities.
And today we are discussing a very hot topic that seems always relevant, and that is the issue of cheating in esports.
Yeah. So, as everybody knows, cheating has been a major topic that's been discussed lately, given that we had a recent Twitch Rivals tournament. We're going to talk about that a little bit. But first, let's understand what cheating is and how it's defined legally and how it's been argued to be defined in the courts. So cheating is basically taking an action that allows players to modify a game in a way that gives players an unfair advantage over other players, right?
Right. And really, cheating can take place and you can gain an unfair advantage in kind of four different ways. One of the ways is through software. And I think we've seen that a lot recently with the Call of Duty games, certain CSGO titles. And that includes things like aimbots, where a software program automatically aims for you. Wall hacks that allows you to see players through walls. Things like color hacking to more easily see players in CSGO. It can take place through hardware, which could be something like a turbo controller, or if anyone recalls the old Xbox days on Call of Duty, people could use what's called a Cronus Max that would plug into your controller, that you would plug into the Xbox, that would allow you to pull the trigger one time and have it spam a semi-automatic gun and shoot a million times, double jump. All these things that a Cronus Max would allow you to do.
As an OG Xbox player, I know I used to do this all the time. So the turbo trigger pull.
Turbo controllers have been an issue with hardware. And then information is another way to gain an unfair advantage. And that's actually outlawed by a number of professional organizations. And that is simply, if you're in a tournament, you cannot watch the stream broadcast of that tournament to see how the other team is playing. You have to get all that information in-game from your own players. You're also not allowed to collude and talk with other coaches about how they are watching another team, what they've done to scout. There are certain rules against that. And then lastly, there are competitive rules violations. And those are specific to every esport, but those can include things like not using certain exploits. Right. And we've seen that kind of in Warzone with stem glitches, little glitches or being able to potentially get outside the boundary of a competitive map and move around, that even if the exploit's allowed, you're still not, or even if the exploit's possible, you're still not allowed to use it. So you're not using a software, you're using the exploit in the game, but it creates an unfair advantage. Things like team killing. So, for instance, in Call of Duty, if you're playing hardpoint, you're not allowed to team kill your buddy so he respawns closer to the hardpoint. Things like that aren't really a software advantage. It's an in-game issue that is just banned. And then as far as competitive rules violations, you have to look at rulemaking bodies to see what is banned. And you can look at the Call of Duty League, CDL, the Electronic Sports League, ESL, the CSGO League, the Overwatch League, and they all have their own rules that they make for competitive rules.
And something that we're going to be focusing on and discussing a lot today are major, all parts of the four things that we discussed, right? Big things we're going to be talking about are things like wall hacks, aimbotting, really the software, the hardware stuff, not so much. Information, as you guys recall, whenever Fortnite was first blowing up, there were guys that were, because it's a point-based system, were watching live streams of other streamers landing where they were and trying to sabotage their ability or inability to score points or give points, and then use that information for purposes of getting an advantage.
Right. And so if we look at some notable cheating incidents from the past and their outcomes, we can get an idea of how serious the problem can be. One of the first incidents that I remember being a really big deal and causing a lot of problems for organization was the Forsaken scandal in Optic India with CSGO. What happened is in 2018, there was a player named Nikhil Kumawat. His handle was Forsaken, playing CSGO tournament at Extremes Land in 2018. And he was flagged by the Valve anti-cheat system, the VAC, for aimbotting. They pulled him aside, pulled his PC aside, and found out that he did have aimbots installed. He also had wall hacks installed, where you could see players through walls. And he had been using them not only in Extremes Land in 2018, but he used them in previous tournaments. And what happened to Forsaken and Optic India is pretty astounding. Forsaken was fired, dropped from Optic India. Optic India had to forfeit all of their wins and all of their prize money from Extremes Land 2018. And the fallout was so severe that Optic India actually disbanded as an organization. Optic India no longer exists after this issue with Forsaken in 2018. And I'm not saying that his cheating was the precise cause of being disbanded, but the fallout means that it's hard to get in other tournaments. It's hard to rebuild your brand.
Absolutely.
And Optic is one of those brands that's so strong. I mean, the brand is the strength of that team, really, that it was just safer for them to disband the entire thing and move on elsewhere.
Which I'm kind of glad that, such extreme measures were taken, because it gave them credibility, right? Because one of the big things that whenever cheating happens, credibility, which we're going to talk about later as well. But it should have been sort of a wake-up call for teams around the world to saying, hey, this is something that is taken so seriously, because it delegitimizes the esports organization and the game that they're playing and the nature of the tournaments that these people are competing in. And so now, following the Optic India issue, do you have anything else to add to that?
Not to the Optic India issue, but there's another CSGO issue that's
right.
really become a problem. And that is in September of 2020, a press release was issued from ESL that at least 10 coaches had taken advantage of an exploit against CSGO and ESL's rules. And that was the coach exploit. And for people that don't know what I'm talking about, there was a bug, a very basic bug in 2015 in CSGO, where if you were the coach of a team, you could spectate all of your team members. But a certain bug could be triggered that would allow you to spectate all the teams in all the players in the match.
Mm-hmm.
So you could see where the other team was, what they were planning on doing, where they set up, where they moved to, which is against the rules.
And it's an obvious, it's cheating.
Yeah, it's cheating. It'd be like, you get to hear the other side's plays as they're being called in football. I mean, it gave a very obvious competitive advantage.
Right.
The problem was it was a bug that was fixed, so it wouldn't happen accidentally. You had to trigger it by performing certain actions. Coaches triggered that bug so they could continue using that exploit after 2015. And it happened for years and years. This just came out in September of 2020, where they found out that at least 10 coaches had used the coaching exploit. And ESL made a press release, and in that press release, they said it's in the best interest of ESL and competitive integrity to enforce sanctions, bans, and other punitive measures on these coaches. And so you have certain coaches, Hard Legion Esports, their coach had a 2-year ban from ESL and was subsequently fired. Team Heroic, 1-year ban from ESL. Team MIBR, 6-month ESL ban. Certain coaches were suspended. Others had admitted to using the bug and are now facing sanctions. But remember, all this just kind of came out late last year. So we haven't seen the full outcome of those allegations and that investigation. And we've already seen multiple coaches be banned for years from ESL. And if you're a coach, maybe not in the US, but you're EU or you're in Asia and really the only thing you have access to is ESL, that's a huge deal.
Yeah.
And it was because they were using this coach exploit. And the worst part was it didn't even really guarantee you would win. It just gave you information that your players kind of could have got if they were just communicating well, they were peaking correctly.
Right.
And now multiple coaches have been fired. They've been banned for multiple years because of that issue. And so that was a big one. And that was really an exploit. It wasn't a software hack. It wasn't a hardware hack. It was an exploit that was used against the rules.
Right.
And so it's important to have the rules defined, but there are some situations where you may not know exactly how the rules have been violated. And then it comes down to the organization or the event host to determine what happened. And we've seen that recently.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things where if you're having to ask yourself, is this legal or not? If you think it gives you a fair advantage, you should always err on the side of caution and avoid taking advantage of those exploits, right? Because that's what they are. They're part of the game, but they're exploiting the way the game should be played. Now, most recently, one of the things that we saw was just this past weekend was the Twitch Rivals tournament. Now, we've talked about CSGO. I know a lot of the viewers and a lot of the people that are listening to this probably care about what's going on right now with Warzone, right? And the status of Warzone because it's in a bit of chaos. People are dropping left and right. Major streamers, major players are stepping away from Warzone because of their lack of this technology that we talked that CSGO does have of capturing and noticing cheats, right? And so one of the things that we saw was the Twitch Rivals Dorito Bowl tournament where there was a pocket of $250,000.
The total prize purse was $250,000. I think the number one team would get $45,000, which is trios, so that's $15,000 a player. That's a pretty healthy sum. And even then, I think second place was $10,000, third place was $7,000, and so there's some solid prize money on the table.
Oh yeah, and there's a lot of very good players that are competing in this tournament. And so, obviously, whenever you have such skilled players, you would think that these guys are so good that they don't need to cheat. But even then, whenever money's involved, there's always going to be people that are going to come out of the woodwork to try to take an unfair advantage. Like Nick Merck said in his tweet, if there's cheese, there's going to be rats. And I think this is one of those situations where there may have been a possible cheating incident. Obviously, it hasn't been confirmed absolutely, but it was discovered by basically the Call of Duty investigator, Tommy, with 100 Thieves and the incident with Mitzi. And so essentially what happened was Mitzi was, I think it was towards the finals. It was towards the last games that really made a huge impact as to who would get what amount at the end of the tournament. And there was some unnatural movement coming from Mitzi as far as his aiming, right? He was going against a squad. He was shooting a guy down and a couple of other guys jumped out the window. And there was a very, very suspicious snap from the player he was shooting instantly to the head of the guy that had came out of the window with a riot shield, followed with the guy that was behind him. And the cameras sort of, whenever you rewatch it, it's very suspicious.
Yeah, and that importantly, that clip that you're talking about was not a clip from the tournament. It was a clip of Metzi's earlier gameplay, but that was used in conjunction with the video of his gameplay in the tournament to create a bigger sample size to determine, did he just get great shots on some of these players in the tournament? Was he extra cracked out for it? And did he take a bunch of extra G Fuel? Did he put extra padding on his gaming chair? Or is it something more nefarious? And the problem with Call of Duty not having an anti-cheat system and people playing predominantly, at least on the competitive side, on PC, means that there are ample opportunities for aimbotting, hacking, because if you look at some of those clips from Metzi, he clearly wasn't aimbotting for just headshots, right? We don't know if he was aimbotting at all, but the fact that on PC you can adjust how precise your hacks would be is an issue that makes everyone suspicious.
Right.
And so when you have a guy like Metzi who was a small streamer, he had to qualify for the tournament. He wasn't just invited, but he had to qualify for it. He had like 30 or 40 concurrent viewers during the tournament.
Yeah.
That grew a lot after these allegations.
Right.
But, a smaller streamer who is going against former Call of Duty pros, former Fortnite pros,
right,
people who are extraordinarily good at aiming with mouse and keyboard or controller in their respective esports. You have these allegations that came out, and the trouble was, first of all, the fallout that it caused for Metsi, and also the way Twitch had to respond.
Right. And that's one of the big things, right? Mitzi is clearly a skilled player, and nobody's saying that he is not good. But what the issue that we're having is that because there's no anti-cheat software in COD, we're having to rely on basically reviewing of video. And the reason why we're talking about this, right, and the reason why we're talking about it in this podcast in particular is because cheating has legal implications. It's not like you're cheating, right? Whenever it involves money and whenever it involves potential gambling, it has effects that will affect you as a player, you as a streamer, and the organization that you are participating on behalf of. And so one of the things that really brought to my attention was the fact that Twitch released a statement, right? Because after Mitzi was alleged that he was cheating, Twitch reviewed the tape and they released a very interesting statement that was essentially that the movement, at least according to the video they reviewed, the movement was suspicious or unnatural, and they use a very important legal term, beyond a reasonable doubt, right? Which is actually a very serious burden of proof in criminal law, right? Meaning that there is not just reasonable doubt, but beyond a reasonable doubt, which is extremely high burden. And it's something that, was, I don't know whether it was done intentionally or not, but, Twitch obviously takes these things very seriously. And one of the fallouts of cheating is you're going to be banned. You're going to be banned from the tournament. And you could potentially be banned from the entire platform. And a lot of these guys, this platform is their livelihood. You're essentially firing them from their job and not allowing them to come back to a source of revenue for them. Now, we're going to move on now and discuss, sort of the more legal aspect of cheating, right? But before I do, some of the non-legal effects that it has whenever a game doesn't have anti-cheating software is that they start to lose major players, right? Call of Duty and Activision, I think, have been lacking in the sense that they don't listen to their viewers in a way to where they're not effectuating a method of preventing people from cheating in these tournaments. They're involving a lot of money. Most recently, Nick Marks, like that tweet that I quoted, stated that he no longer was going to compete in these tournaments. And a lot of other professional players have stated that they're not competing in these tournaments. But there are also smaller players that have been caught using software, which is one of the big things that we discussed, third-party software to help cheat, right? You guys can Google it, but there's this guy named Mr. Gold, who's a very small streamer, who was boasting about how good he was with the Car 98 and how good he is. And he somehow showed on his stream live that he was using a software. It was called Engine Owning or something like that, where he was, essentially found out that he was cheating, which leads me to the discussion of also something very recent as far as August of 2020, where Activision, because they don't have anti-cheating software, are starting to take legal action against people that produce these third-party software that helps people cheat, right? Specifically, we're talking about the Activision versus a software company called CX Cheats.
Yeah, I think Activision, I do think that Activision has done a great job with Call of Duty, particularly with Warzone, with keeping it relevant. I think they've listened to players and community members on certain aspects of the game. Certainly trying to keep it fresh with, the integration with Cold War, which has got to be extraordinarily difficult. There's still bugs they're working out, but they're still attempting to make it work. And I think a big risk in installing an anti-cheat is you risk having your anti-cheat be overactive, and you don't want to lose players that are good who just have some other program running in the background that's not a hacking program, if they have Twitter on in the background or something. We're not tech developers. We have no idea what all goes into coding an anti-cheat for to be implemented into a game like Warzone that has the amount of players that it does, right? That's free to play.
Yeah. Which is massive. It's a massive game.
Yeah, it makes it massive. And so, but I know other games have had it. And so I think Activision is doing a good job in trying to prevent cheating. It's just, the community has been pretty, solid in asking for an anti-cheat.
They've been vocal, extremely vocal.
And they've been in agreement that anti-cheat is really needed in Warzone, because the issue with a battle royale like Fortnite, like Warzone, is that you're not part of a league or an organization usually when you're competing in these things. You can be, right? Tommy's a member of 100 Thieves. He plays Warzone, but there's a lot of streamers and a lot of players who aren't part of an org who just go and play. And so they may have more or less incentive to implement a cheating system.
Right.
And that's a big risk whenever you're looking at Warzone. And so the steps Activision is taking outside of anti-cheat have been pretty significant.
Right. And obviously, and there's no denying that they listen to their players, right? They listen to the community. Whenever a gun needs fixing, like the DMR most recently, they go and they do it quickly, which is difficult with a massive game. But aside from the game itself, there are a lot of implications for players and organizations, which is what we're going to talk about now.
Well, especially if you manufacture cheats.
Right.
If you're a company, I mean, if you're not a player or org, but you manufacture a cheat or you purchase a cheat from a cheat manufacturer, that's kind of a problem.
And there's that's that in and of itself. And as you've seen, and which it's not something that's very common, because a lot of these things are fairly new because of the nature of the games that are being played now, and the how big it is. I think as time and as the law and jurisprudence develop, we're going to see that hopefully the courts and the government take bigger action, and companies themselves like Activision and Epic take legal actions against these manufacturers and these developers of these cheating software to sort of hopefully slow it down or hinder it, or in a perfect world, get rid of it altogether.
Yeah. So, and cheating software, when we talk about cheat manufacturers, I think a lot of people know what this is, but just in case, something like an aimbot or a wall hack isn't something that is already in the game. People will take, companies sometimes, or individuals will take the code, they'll modify it, and then they'll sell it to you as a file to run in the background of your game that gives you that advantage.
Right.
But, and I think you were talking about it earlier, some of those cheat manufacturers have come under fire.
Right, absolutely. And one of the biggest ones, obviously, that we've seen is CX cheats with Activision. But one of the things that it's important that players understand is that whenever you have these softwares on your computer, it will play a major role in any potential implications that you may have in violating the law, right? And so because you're essentially have copyright infringement, right? You have code that has been taken outside of what it's supposed to be, and you're using it within the game, right? And which sort of leads me to now, how does cheating affect you as a player, as an organization? Okay, I'm going to discuss a little bit players. Jake will go how it affects as an organization. Okay, so let's start off with basically the thing that we just discussed. Cheating will open or subject you to trademark or copyright infringement claims. Right, they're one of the major claims that these major developers, game developers, have had against these third-party software cheating companies are major claims like software infringement, copyright infringement, contributory copyright infringement, things of that nature. DMCA claims that will open you as a player for owning those things, right? Not only do you lose the $60, $70 that you paid to own it, but you yourself can be subject to trademark copyright infringement. It's the same thing how back in the day when you used to use LimeWire and used to download illegal music, AT&T, Comcast, those major companies were cracking down on your internet providers were cracking down on people that were streaming and downloading illegal stuff because they themselves can open up to criminal or civil statutes. So essentially what some of the major things that could implicate you as a player if you decide to cheat would be that these main major game developers could bring claims like copyright infringement against you, which we have discussed, contributory copyright infringement, which is essentially where you are not necessarily doing the copyright infringement, but you're using and you're contributing by funding it and paying for it. Another thing is trademark infringement, and some of the major ones is breach of contract, because oftentimes whenever you compete in these major tournaments, you are agreeing, right, oftentimes by a written contract that you will not take any unfair advantage over other players, such as cheating and using software to help you cheat, because at the end of the day, you're cheating people out of money and you're cheating them out of an opportunity of getting money.
Right.
And then another significant one is violations of local and state unfair competition laws, right? Most states have very stringent and very strict laws when it comes to competition whenever it involves a prize, and it prevents you from taking certain actions that will make your competition unfair, because at the end of the day, you're winning money and it's a type of fraud to a degree. If you live in California, just go look at California Business and Professional Code 17200. It discusses the unfair competition law in California where major players live, and that's really the law that applies to a lot of people that are competing there. Along with that, it opens you up to civil penalties, right? People don't think about this, but if you were caught cheating, very much how it is in the NFL and in the NBA and MMA, you're subject to fines, you're subject to lawsuits, you're subject to being banned if you're caught cheating on Twitch or YouTube or Mixer whenever it was around. If you were cheating, you were going to be banned from the platform. You're not making any more money. On top of that, you can lose sponsorships. For those of you guys that are big enough to have sponsorships, there is usually a termination for cause clause in a lot of these tournaments. If you are cheating, that is a valid and legal reason for a corporation to essentially terminate a sponsorship contract with you, and it gives them a cause to terminate it, and you lose that sponsorship. And more importantly, you lose credibility. People will stop watching you. You're going to lose subs, and organizations will distance themselves from you if you're ever caught cheating.
Yeah, so it's a problem where your entire brand can essentially dissolve, like we saw with Optic India.
Absolutely.
It's entirely possible.
Yeah, and it happened. With, for example, Optic, fortunately, is still a very reputable organization. I have a lot of respect for Optic. I have a lot of respect for the guys that have run Optic. But for a fact that after that incident, they lost credibility. And most players, right, especially the ones that have left the esports world, the professional competitive playing sports to become streamers, it's a brand. Your name, Nigmerks, Ninja used to be a competitive Halo player. A lot of these guys, if you're found to be cheating, even if you do it once, it affects the integrity of our gameplay before. And if they see that you're a good player, they're going to be like, well, how do I know he wasn't cheating in the past? And so you want to avoid that at all costs. Yeah,
no, aimbot in esports is like popping on a steroid test in MMA. You look at John Jones, who had picograms of some performance-enhancing drugs, and now every single win he's ever had, people are questioning.
They question it. Absolutely.
And even, no matter how good he is, people question it because they found out that he had some banned substance in the system. Yeah. Same thing, if you're ever found to be using an aimbot or a wall hack, it doesn't matter how much gun skill you have, how great of a personality you have, it's going to call some of your accomplishments into question.
Absolutely. And if it does that, it's going to bring your character into question, which will prevent organizations and tournaments from inviting you to compete and from inviting you to become a member of their organization.
And that's particularly important in the BR community, where there's not large sanctioned events where they have certain organizations present, but where they're inviting individual streamers and individual personalities to play in the tournament.
Right.
And so, the next time there's a Twitch Rivals tournament, will Metzi be invited? I don't know. If it's determined that he was in fact hacking, probably not.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of money on the table, literally.
Yeah.
To leave.
Absolutely.
And to forfeit if you can't be a part of that community.
Absolutely. And so, in a lot of these things, I'm talking specifically about players. A lot of these things will carry on and affect an organization and how an organization competes and runs their teams.
Right. And when it comes to organizations in esports are really in a unique position. And I think you'll hear that from this podcast on a number of different topics. But the main issue with esports that I think a lot of people have a hard time identifying and dealing with is the fact that team organizations and teams themselves, even leagues themselves, don't own the games that they're playing. And those games are copyrighted and owned by another entity, which is different than the NFL. If you want to create a professional football league and call it something else, you're welcome to do so. And you can have you can use a football, you can have 11 men on offense, 11 men on defense, and you're not infringing on anything. Whereas with leagues, if a league wants to play CSGO or they want to play Call of Duty, those games are owned by somebody else. And so because like ESL doesn't own the rights to the code to CSGO, if someone's hacking at an ESL event, there's different punishments and repercussions from ESL as opposed to Valve. Because Valve can sue for copyright infringement. They can sue for contributory copyright infringement. But ESL doesn't own the copyright. They don't own the code. So they have a different type of system for punishing players that gain an unfair advantage. So whenever you're a league or an org, really, when you're a league, every league has a competitive rule set. Some are more fleshed out than others, and some, I think, are more lenient than others, but they all have one. And I think the two that just come to mind are the two I mentioned earlier, which is the Call of Duty League and ESL, the Electronic Sports League. And when it comes to the Call of Duty League, the Call of Duty League professional rules are confidential.
Yeah.
So even if we had them, they're privileged and we can't discuss them.
Right.
They're not publicly available. People have hinted at what's in there, but we can't talk about it.
Yeah.
But Call of Duty League challengers, the kind of semi-pro level, are publicly available. And we can guess, if we had to, that they're probably pretty similar to the professional rule set, at least when it comes to competitive integrity and cheating. When it comes to sponsorships, promos, trading, all that, who knows? But when it comes to competitive integrity, we can guess that they're probably pretty similar. And so if you're an org, make sure you pay attention to how cheating is defined and how it's determined. Because if we look at the Call of Duty Challengers League rules, cheating is defined by using a number of different exploits, obviously hardware, software, but also things like colluding, team killing when you're not supposed to, using out of boundary map areas. But the way cheating is determined and the way punishments are determined is interesting, because cheating is determined by a review of that player's gameplay and also by a review of their hardware. So now that Call of Duty is predominantly on PC for competitive, they're going to scan your PC. They're also going to watch the VODs of your previous games. But the way that punishments are handed down, and this is from the CDO rule set, this is rule 9.2.2, which says violations of this section, whether during the course of a challenger's season, during the challenger's off-season, or prior to a participant's entrance into challengers, may result in discipline to be determined in the discretion of the administration. That's kind of a loose standard.
Yeah.
Anytime there's discretion, you have no idea what the punishment's going to be. But what that means is if you flirt with the line, you don't know how severe that hammer can come down.
And I think they do that on purpose, right? It's not necessarily a bug, but a feature that these organizers want to be able to reserve the right to do what they think is necessary under certain circumstances. And it makes it so unique because unlike, regular seasons, right? Pre-COVID, you would go to a tournament, you would be there, they would give you equipment, they would ensure that the equipment that you were using doesn't have any illegal software, cheating software in them. Whereas now the environment is completely different. We're dealing with people playing from the comfort of their homes, people playing all over the world. You don't need to go to a specific venue to compete anymore. You do this from home, and it opens up that door to cheat, right? And people will play with fire and risk it and potentially get caught or not get caught and, get a bunch of money as a result of winning a tournament for cheating.
Yeah. And so you have to be familiar with the rules and how it's determined. Like I said, CDL challengers, kind of a loose standard. It's on purpose, but that means you don't really know how bad it can be. Obviously, if you're caught cheating during a tournament, the standard is to forfeit the matches you've played. And if it's let's say an exploit, say that you were using a certain type of ammunition that was banned in the rule set, they may just have you forfeit your matches if it was an honest mistake. If it's something more nefarious, some sort of software hacking, they may kick you out of the entire tournament.
Right.
And then you may have a discussion about whether that player is fired or whether the team is banned for the rest of the season.
The entire organization can't be banned.
Yeah, which it can be a huge problem. In challengers, it can be a huge problem because you have kids coming up and you can really mess up the careers of multiple people. And the Call of Duty Pro League, that can be an even bigger problem where you've just spent $25 million a year ago to have this league in competition.
Yeah.
And now you could be banned from it.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty big price to pay.
Right.
So there's that system. Then there's the system that's in ESL, the Electronic Sports League, where they have the point system. So they have minor violations, which is generally unintentional stuff. And then they have major violations. And they're awarded a certain amount of points based on what your violation is. So if you're caught software hacking, you get 12 points added. There are 12 violation points. And we have to forfeit all the matches you've played. If you get up to 35 violation points in the season, your team is done. And so they go through a point system, and cheating is determined by review. But in the ESL rule set, and we're not going to go through the entire one right now.
Right.
But they have everything listed out, whether it's a game exploit, like the coaching exploit from CSGO, whether it's software hacking, whether it's hardware hacking. They have they've enumerated all these types of gain an unfair advantage. Information sharing is another big one.
Yeah.
Whether you have someone watching the stream of the tournament on their phone and giving information as to how these guys are setting up in a CSGO tournament or a CSGO round. But they use a point system. And so it's a little bit easier to determine what can happen to your team if any of these hacking incidents occur. But it's also easy to see that if one of your players is found to have an aimbot, you know exactly what's going to happen.
Right.
And you're going to be banned from that tournament.
Yeah. And unlike, CSGO and the games we're seeing now, that the esports league, or I should say competitive, has been around with CSGO for a while.
Yeah.
That's not really the case for a lot of these new games that we're seeing, like Fortnite, Warzone, where the setup is a little different, right? We're dealing with, instead of, the limited amount of players going against another team with a specific goal, we're talking about these open world, to a degree, games where you have 120 people in a lobby and the last one to live wins, right? The battle royale. And it's difficult to develop a system, but at the end of the day, you shouldn't wait to see what's going to happen. You shouldn't be doing it at all because it implicates you.
It does. And if, let's say you're an org owner or you're a team owner, because most of these games are predominantly on PC, hopefully your gamers have a gaming PC and then they have a personal PC. And the reason why you want to do that is because if you're suspected of cheating, or if you just want to be precautionary, which is what we would recommend, you want to scan those PCs before every tournament.
Absolutely.
Because you don't want a situation where someone has a hack even loaded on their computer and have it be present. Because if they're suspected at all, they're going to scan that PC. They're going to find that hack. Whether or not it was used isn't the point. The fact that it's on the PC they used in the tournament can cause you to forfeit the matches you've played, and then they'll delete that file, or they'll boot you out of the tournament as a whole. So scan the PCs. Hopefully your players have a gaming PC. If you are a gamer and you use your PC as your personal and gaming machine, be particularly careful about what you have loaded on there.
Right.
Even if you have to have an external hard drive to put your personal photos on, stuff like that. Or if you're in challengers, or if you're in an amateur league and you're still in college, make sure that your schoolwork is saved somewhere else besides your PC, or things that you just don't want seen, like something personal.
Yeah.
I would take that off, put it on a separate hard drive before you go to any tournament or anything, because your PC can be scanned.
Absolutely.
They can open up anything. Matter of fact, after Twitch Rivals, Medsy let guys remote into his computer.
Yeah.
They were searching through pretty much everything. And that's pretty invasive to have happen, especially when you have no control over what the other person opens.
Yeah. And they didn't find anything.
They didn't.
To be fair, which doesn't necessarily completely, definitively say that he didn't do anything, but just at the time, he was open about it and they didn't find anything. Yeah.
I think another important issue besides scanning PCs before every tournament is these leagues have punishments for cheating. And that can be a player being suspended or banned. But if you're a league or an owner, or if you're a player, you need to be aware that your contract with that org can have a clause in that contract about if you cheat, or a contract about a code of conduct in general.
Yep.
And if you violate that code of conduct, which can be really anything, if you do something obscene on stream, if you do something over the top or obscene on Twitter and start calling out publishers and incurring fines for your org, any of those things, if you stream or Instagram drug use, they can cause you to be fired, but they can wrap cheating in game into that. And you can lose your bonus. Mm-hmm. You can lose your salary. You may have to pay back a bonus or a salary. And so I think those are important clauses to have if you're a team or an org. And I think it's a particularly important clause to be aware of if you're a player.
Right. And you know, kind of picking back off of what you said as an organization, and I think it's a great idea is to have computers, right? What we would consider work computers, right? Mm. Things that are specifically for tournaments. Right. Because you've seen it a lot in Fortnite. There are players out there that will download hacking or cheating software to create content, right? Because not only are they professional players, they're also content creators. And although I don't justify it, as a matter of fact, I do quite the opposite. I would not recommend players cheat in order to create content, right? Because it sort of makes it appealing for the younger masses and people that are looking at getting into the game or not good at the game and want to get better. You want to avoid that at all costs. But, I get it. Sometimes people got to grind and they have to create their content. You have to be extremely careful not to load or put anything on these computers. And as an organization, you have to ensure that your players are keeping any type of software like that off of your computers that you compete, because like you said, they will be scanned.
Yep.
And so at the end of the day, cheating is extremely frowned upon. Okay. It makes the game less enjoyable for the casual player. It makes the game less enjoyable for the professional player. But whenever it involves a large purse, right? Whenever it involves money, when it involves possible gambling, which as you can see now, Vegas is becoming friendly to the idea of gambling and involving gambling in major esports tournaments like CSGO, Fortnite, now Warzone as it gets bigger. It's not just, I'm cheating, I'm going to get banned. It's you may get sued. You may get fined. You may get prosecuted for certain violation of criminal statutes, because it's not just you anymore, right? You will affect folks that could potentially be making bets on behalf of your organization. It's going to affect your organization. It's going to affect your organization owners and the investors of an organization. And so you have to be extremely careful, both as a player as an organization, in monitoring your players to ensure that nobody is cheating.
And we should mention, whether you're a league, an org, a player, a streamer, just a personality that likes to play and be competitive, there are legal ramifications for conduct, and then there are business ramifications. And a lot of times we'll leave those business ramifications out of our analysis. But I think in this scenario, it's especially important to mention that maybe the worst thing that happens isn't a fine, isn't a ban, but if there's rampant cheating that makes your game not competitive or not fun to watch, one of the biggest risks in esports is your esport becoming unpopular.
Right.
And that ruins it for every team, every org, every league, every streamer. If your esport appears to not be legitimate because everyone is taking advantage of some issue, it can shut down streamers that are popular in it.
Yeah.
Leagues that are popular with it. Yeah. It can create a lot of problems. And so you're really putting pretty much everyone that's involved in the esport at risk, mm-hmm. if you contribute to obtaining an unfair advantage,
right,
in a variety of ways.
Right. And so, for the reasons that we've stated, it's extremely important that people take cheating more seriously, right? It's not something that, he's cheating. It's not that anymore. This has become such a massive business that people need to understand that it's not just a game, right? You hear people's parents say, it's just a game. It's not just a game. We're dealing with money. We're dealing with people's livelihoods. And so it's extremely important. And I think we're getting there, but people should really, really take it seriously and avoid it at all costs. And if you see it happening, prevent it. If you have a teammate that's doing something they shouldn't be doing, don't allow it, right? We've got guys, I think from 100 Thieves, Symphony, who has been alleged that he's a cheater. He's just really good at the game. You have to also be extremely careful whenever you allege that something is cheating, because it's becoming such a major issue. You can ruin somebody's livelihood by inappropriately alleging that they're cheating. There's a lot of players that are just good. Okay, it's sounds bad, but some people are just good and it looks like they're cheating, right? Symphony does a thing with the mouse flick where he makes it look like he's, appearing into somebody.
And the appearance on your brand can also be damaged if you're constantly accusing people of cheating,
right?
And they're not, just because of how much damage it can cause. And we saw Tommy's apology tweet to Mitzi when they didn't find any software on his machine,
right?
Even though that's not the most thorough investigation, it was certainly an invasion of that guy's privacy.
Absolutely.
And then we just saw a video from True Game Data about Warzone on January 22nd, where he found out that kill cams, which is the video that right after you get killed, you see what the other player was doing, that kill cams that play before you go to the gulag are played at 133% speed.
They're sped up.
Yeah, they're sped up to get you in the gulag, which is a software, modification.
It's designed that way, yeah.
Yeah, to get you in the gulag faster so you can keep on playing. But professional players were accusing people of hacking because it looked like they were getting snapped on with the aimbot, but really it was just a kill cam being played a third faster than normal speed.
Right.
And so
which is significant, by the way.
Which is significant, and it can make a guy slowly aiming on the head look like he's snapping on the head and clicking it, which can look like cheating. And so be careful about cheating accusations as well. And I know in the Warzone community in particular, it's been very common that if you get killed in a way that you're not happy with, you just say he's cheating. Yeah. Like, this guy's cheating. He's walled me or aimbotted me.
Yeah. We all do it.
We've all done it.
We get outplayed and we don't like it.
I think out of frustration, we've all done it. But if you're in the public eye, if you're streaming, if you're a professional player, you have to be very careful nowadays with who you accuse for all these reasons that we stated, because cheating has the ramifications that it does.
Yeah.
That if you do it in scrims, you may do it in a tournament. And people think that if you've cheated once, like we said, it taints you for the rest of your competitive career. So you have to be particularly careful if you're accusing people of cheating.
Yeah.
Especially because we know with skill-based matchmaking in games like Warzone, that if you're in an upper tier lobby, a quote unquote diamond lobby, you're probably going to be in there with other streamers and other personalities. So be careful about who you're accusing.
Yeah.
And sometimes if you get beat, you get beat. Unfortunately, at the moment, there's not an anti-cheat to be sure that someone's cheating or not. But again, cheating, very serious issue.
Yeah.
Accusing people of cheating, while we haven't seen the ramifications of legal actions from it yet, it's possible.
Absolutely.
And if it happens, you'll see another episode from us on it.
Absolutely.
But I think that really cheating is a tricky issue.
Yeah.
In esports.
Yeah. And one that should not be taken lightly.
Correct.
And so if I can leave you with this, there's a very popular saying in the legal community, right? When you're a lawyer and you go to court, you should never misrepresent to the court, legal issues and case law. But there's a saying that says it takes an entire lifetime for you to build up your reputation, for you to build up respect, but it only takes seconds for you to lose it. As a professional player, especially somebody that creates a brand around their, the way they play the games that they're playing, you could be a great player. The second that you cheat, you will lose credibility and it will affect you in every way imaginable. Financially, emotionally, personally, people will, sort of distance themselves away from you. It's going to happen. So at the end of the day, just don't cheat.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Again, we appreciate it. I hope you saw our first episode on swatting. If you didn't, please go back, check that out. We think that's a really important issue as well. We're going to continue to bring relevant content about legal issues in esports. If you have any questions, please reach out to us on Twitter. Leave a comment on the YouTube video. Give us a rating on Spotify.
Yeah.
We appreciate it.
Yeah.
And with that, we'll see you guys next time.
Absolutely.